Hello everyone. Today we're going to be learning about nutrient cycles. Before we get too far into this, I've decided to separate this particular PowerPoint into two sections because it is rather extensive. And I've also uploaded the PowerPoint itself to the website so that you can print it off and take notes from there if you would like, because there is quite a bit of information here. We are going to go quite a bit into chemistry, so if I lose you, don't worry too much. We'll catch everybody up in class. We cycle nutrients, or we don't, the ecosystem cycles nutrients throughout the entire biosphere or the ecosphere. It occurs at the local level through the action of the biota or all the living things, and it occurs globally through geological processes like atmospheric circulation, erosion, and weathering. Nutrient cycles happen because the atoms in Earth, the atoms of Earth and life are all the same. All living things use the same basic elements, and they find themselves in different places at different times. For example, the calcium that you have in your bones mostly came from cows, from milk. The cows got that calcium from corn, and the corn took it in from rocks, and those rocks were once formed at the bottom of the ocean. The pathway that atoms take from the biotic to the abiotic world and back again is called the biochemical cycle. The elements in life, there are about 50 to 70 that are found in living things. We only really have studied only about half of the 15 that are typically found in living things. These are the majority or form the major biomass of all living things. And the ones that we are going to study are oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, and phosphorus. Those are the big chemical cycles that we're going to look at. In general, all systems cycle in this way, where we have inorganic matter that is taken in mostly by producers, but in some ways consumers and decomposers. Those producers are eaten by consumers, and they also die themselves and break down into non-living organic matter. This non-living matter is taken in by the decomposers, and the decomposers turn it once again into organic matter. Same thing happens with consumers as they die. They are broken down into inorganic matter. So keep that in mind. This is a general cycling of all nutrients. There are 4 different compartments that nutrients are stored in a terrestrial ecosystem. We have the organic compartment, that is all the living things, and their detritus. Detritus is the broken down dead material. We have an available nutrient compartment, which is mostly in soil. The surface level of soil is where we store most of our nutrients that are available to us. We have a third component that consists of nutrients that are in soil or rocks, but that are unavailable for living things. Bedrock, for example, is something that has lots of nutrient components, but living things cannot access it. And our fourth storage compartment is in the air. Some organisms can take in compounds from the air, some can't, and it varies largely depending on the nutrient that we're talking about. Generally, when inorganic nutrients enter the biotic world, they come from the soil. And the exception to this is carbon dioxide and oxygen, which enters through the leaves of plants and through our lungs. All other pathways are going to come through the soil. We are going to look at the soil components later on when we study agriculture and soil composition, but you do need to know that there is an organic layer here of soil, which is composed of broken down material and bacteria and fungus. And we also have this layer here. This is where roots of plants live and where most of the nutrients are absorbed. Even consumers like us, which can get calcium and phosphorus and sulfur from our water, get the majority of our nutrients from producers. That's either directly, like we eat a plant, or indirectly, where we eat another consumer, like a cow, and take the nutrients that way. So most of this is going to originate with plants. We also get nutrients are also cycled largely through our atmosphere. The atmosphere acts as a huge reservoir for carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water. these inorganic compounds are exchanged directly with biota through photosynthesis and respiration. That is how the carbon cycle is largely driven. The most abundant gas in our atmosphere is nitrogen, which is about 78%. And unfortunately, we can't access nitrogen atmospherically. Even though it surrounds us, we can't get to it. The only way we can use nitrogen usually is through the activity of bacteria. We'll see that in a second. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. This is the backbone of life. CH and O are the basic elements. They make up about 98% of plant biomass. That's most of the weight or the mass of living things. Carbon dioxide and oxygen are stored in the atmosphere, and producers, plants, convert carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates. Carbohydrates always follow the chemical formula CH2O, which means there is always twice as much hydrogen as there is carbon or oxygen. The biggest example is glucose. Its chemical formula is C6H12O6. During photosynthesis, plants release oxygen from that water. So they split water in half, use the energy that's made from that reaction, or that is not made, but converted from that reaction, to fix carbon as a sugar compound, and it releases that oxygen. Producers, consumers, and decomposers, all living things on Earth, convert sugar compounds, those CH2Os, into, using oxygen back into carbon dioxide and water. This is respiration. Again, please remember, all living things on Earth, including plants, including producers, do some form of respiration. This is a generalized drawing of the carbon cycle. Hopefully you remember the carbon cycle from middle school, but what happens here is I have carbon dioxide and water through diffusion, or carbon dioxide slowly moving in and out of water through diffusion. I also have photosynthesis occurring in the water and respiration occurring in the water from our plants, aquatic plants, and aquatic animals. Very, very slow process of sedimentation. Carbon dioxide does form a precipitate in ocean water when you go deep enough, and that will settle to the ocean floor, which you see here. It'll settle and then form rock layers. On land, photosynthesis occurs mainly from plants, or always from plants, but mainly from trees and grasses, to produce oxygen. That carbon dioxide goes into the plant, and then respiration from dead material, from living animals, all of that adds carbon dioxide back into the air. Notice we have a large reservoir of oil, coal, and natural gas. These are long chains of carbon. This is where most of the carbon is stored underground in the form of coal, oil, and natural gas. When humans pull these fossil fuels out of the earth and burn them, we add an enormous amount of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Our second cycle is the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is normally moved as phosphate, PO4 negative 3. That is an anion, so a negatively charged ion. It is absolutely an essential element of life. You can't have DNA without phosphorus. It does not cycle through the atmosphere. This is the only element we will study that does not have an atmospheric component. Please remember that. It is not a gas. Therefore, it has to enter producers through the soil, and it is cycled only or mostly locally from producers, consumers, and decomposers. We do have small local losses by leaching. Phosphorus is very slowly lost through water. However, it is balanced by gains from weathering of rocks. So rocks contain a lot of phosphorus, and as they are broken down by weathering and erosion, they add phosphorus back into the system. Over a very, very long time, geological time, phosphorus will follow a sedimentary cycle. Phosphate will precipitate out of water and form a rock layer and become a sedimentary rock. I'm sorry about the quality of this picture, but this is a general picture of your phosphorus cycle. So we have rain coming down. Remember, there is no phosphorus in the air. We're just talking about the water here. But that rain causes weathering and erosion of this rock layer. That weathering will take phosphorus from the rock into the water, where phosphate will precipitate out of the solution and fall to the bottom to be added to sedimentary rock. Some of it, some of this phosphate is taken up by the plants. Some of it will leak into the soil, and when it leaks into the soil, it is taken in by our terrestrial plants, which are then eaten by animals and broken down by decomposers, and those decomposers release phosphate back into the soil to be cycled in this small little system. Okay? Our third and perhaps most complex cycle is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is a diatomic element, so we write it as N2, and it makes up 78% of the atmosphere, as I said before. Most living things cannot use atmospheric nitrogen to make amino acids, and we make amino acids and nucleic acids out of nitrogen. Therefore, we are dependent on nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which changes nitrogen into ammonia and ammonium. And this is a generalized picture of the nitrogen cycle. Here I have atmospheric nitrogen, which will go into nitrogen-fixing bacteria. This bacteria lives in the soil and is able to change, here we go down here, it's able to change nitrogen into ammonium, which is NH4+. That means it is a positively charged cation. Ammonium can then be broken down can be changed by the process of nitrification by nitrifying bacteria. This produces nitrites, NO2-. Nitrifying bacteria can then be can change nitrites into nitrates, NO3-, and nitrates can be broken down by another bacteria to form atmospheric nitrogen. So this is a general big cycle with just bacteria. Now, along the way, that nitrogen-fixing bacteria can take the ammonium, and if that fixing bacteria is near plants, then the plants can take up that ammonium and use it to make amino acids and nucleic acids. That plant is eaten by animals. Animals eat the amino acids and nucleic acids and are able to use it. At the same time, nitrates can be taken in by plants through the process of assimilation. Again, the nitrates that are in the soil from all this bacteria is absorbed by the plants. And finally, as these plants and animals die, they are taken to a decomposer. The decomposers break down all of the amino acids and nucleic acids formed by the plants and animals and turn it back into ammonium, which enters again into this bacterial cycle. This is, I know, a very complex cycle. It's one of the hardest to understand, and we will work with it extensively in class to make sure that you've got all the steps. Because nitrogen is more complex than a lot of the other cycles, we're going to look at the different sources of nitrogen in our soil. So most of our soil nitrogen comes through biological fixation and atmospheric deposition. We also have an agricultural addition through fertilizer. Farmers will put nitrogen directly on their crops to help them grow. Nitrogen fixation can only happen in a few species of bacteria and cyanobacteria. They are the only ones capable of fixing nitrogen. Some of these are free-living, like our cyanobacteria here, can live all by itself and fixes nitrogen all the time. Others form a mutualistic association with plants. And that's what's happening here, where bacteria live on these little nodules and live directly with the plant and get nutrients from the plant, and in return provide the plant with nitrogen that it needs to live. A few nitrogen-fixing species are lichen species. Remember, a lichen is a symbiotic relationship between a plant and a fungus. And our second form is atmospheric nitrogen, which is stored from or converted from lightning and from the combustion of cars. And I'm going to stop there and start our second video.